Even the first flutter of the heart, the smallest knot in the stomach, or the briefest drift into apprehensive thoughts can ignite a spark of fear within us, a visceral reminder that anxiety has become an inextricable part of modern existence. No longer can we dismiss these sensations as mere tiredness, a side effect of caffeine, or the expected ebb and flow of a busy schedule. The reality is that anxiety has woven itself into every facet of our lives, impacting not only those traditionally deemed anxious, but professionals juggling demanding careers, students facing relentless academic pressures, parents navigating endless responsibilities, and even retirees contending with shifting identities. We are faced with a paradox so stark it demands our full attention. In an era when our understanding of psychology and neuroscience has never been more advanced, when therapies, mindfulness practices, and self-help resources abound, the prevalence and intensity of anxiety continue to climb. How is it that, with so much knowledge at our fingertips, our collective mental well-being can feel more fragile than ever? This contradiction urges us to dig beneath the surface, to seek out the root causes of our inner turmoil rather than simply covering it with temporary coping mechanisms. Could it be that our hyper-connected world, brimming with endless notifications, curated social media feeds, and the relentless pursuit of productivity, overloads our nervous systems in ways our ancestors never imagined? Or perhaps our modern diets, laden with inflammatory ingredients and artificial additives, are starving our brains of the nutrients they require to regulate stress responses effectively. Anxiety is a stealthy adversary. It rarely arrives with sirens blaring or physical wounds to mark its territory. Instead, it seeps into our consciousness, eroding clarity, diminishing creativity, and distorting our capacity for joy. This gradual depletion highlights the urgency of a meticulous exploration. Is it possible to engage with our anxiety intentionally, to glean its underlying messages, and to transform our relationship with it? Can we shift from merely surviving anxious episodes to actively thriving in spite of them? In the journey that follows, you will encounter a structured, evidence-informed pathway comprised of 5 progressive steps, each designed to progressively dismantle anxiety's grip and empower you to reclaim mental equilibrium. Through 3 compelling case studies, a man named Bob wrestling with social anxiety, a woman named Jane burdened by a pervasive sense of unease, and a student named Fred paralyzed by performance anxiety about a looming presentation, we will illustrate how these steps can be tailored to address the full spectrum of anxious experiences. Drawing on cutting-edge research, clinical wisdom, and practical exercises, this guide will show you how to observe your inner landscape with curiosity, cultivate radical willingness to feel discomfort, delve into deep exploration of anxious thoughts, clarify your values and spheres of influence, and commit to purposeful action and acceptance. By weaving these elements into your daily life, you can begin to dissolve the barriers anxiety constructs and step into a life defined not by fear, but by purposeful engagement. Before embarking on this process, take a moment to reflect. Imagine anxiety not as an enemy to be vanquished, but as a messenger, much like the malfunctioning smoke alarm that shrieks at every minor whiff of steam. Our instinctive reaction is to silence the alarm immediately, to flee the kitchen or rip out the batteries, but true wisdom lies in investigating the source of the signal. Is there a fire, or is it mere vapor from the shower? Likewise, anxiety signals a perceived threat, sometimes real, often phantom. By learning to discern the nature of that threat, we can respond appropriately rather than react out of instinctive fear. The journey begins with conscious observation. This foundational step transforms you into an investigator of your own mind. Instead of recoiling from the discomfort, you lean in with gentle curiosity, asking questions like, "What am I feeling right now?" And "Where in my body do these sensations reside?" You might notice a flutter in the chest, a hollow sensation in the gut, or a tension gripping the shoulders. By labeling these sensations and the thoughts accompanying them, apprehensive, unsettled, overwhelmed, you create psychological distance, a technique psychologists call cognitive diffusion. Rather than saying, "I am anxious," you practice noticing, "I'm having the thought that I'm anxious," or "I'm noticing the sensation of tightness." This subtle verbal shift activates the brain's prefrontal cortex, enabling you to witness your anxiety rather than become entangled in it. For Jane, who feels a constant, nagging dread without a clear trigger. This might mean pausing at her desk, closing her eyes and simply noting, "There is a jittery restlessness in my legs," or "I hear a racing mental narrative about tomorrow's to-do list." Initially, this focus may amplify the distress, just as shining a flashlight into darkness temporarily intensifies the shadows. Yet with repeated practice, the shadows retreat, and you discover that you can hold these sensations in awareness without being overwhelmed. Research in mindfulness and acceptance-based therapies confirms that consistent observation reduces amygdala reactivity and strengthens neural pathways associated with emotional regulation. With observation as your anchor, the second step, radical willingness, invites you to choose to feel your anxiety fully, without flinching or fleeing. This is not masochistic endurance, but a deliberate embrace of what already exists. Throughout our lives, we develop avoidance strategies, distracting ourselves with screens, numbing with substances, or seeking constant busyness to evade discomfort. Yet avoidance only amplifies anxiety's power, shrinking our world further until walls close in. Instead, radical willingness asks you to lean into the discomfort, to deliberately allow the trembling hands or queasy stomach that accompany fear. You might slow your breath, place your hand on your chest, and say softly, "I welcome these sensations as part of being human." If sitting with the intensity feels too daunting, you can amplify it on your own terms. Shake your hands more vigorously, clench your jaw, then release, demonstrating to your nervous system that you can tolerate and even modulate these bodily reactions. Over weeks, this practice rewires the body's stress response, showing the amygdala and autonomic nervous system that you remain safe amid physiological arousal. For Fred, whose performance anxiety sends him into frantic all-night study sessions, radical willingness could mean standing in front of a mirror, feeling the adrenaline spike, and mentally affirming, "This energy can fuel my focus," rather than racing for coffee or scrolling away the tension. Bob, who dreads attending social gatherings, might pause at the doorway, breathe into the queasiness in his stomach, and repeat under his breath, "It's okay to feel anxious and still move forward." Clinical studies in exposure therapy and acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, repeatedly demonstrate that willingness to experience fear without escape is one of the most potent antidotes to avoidance behaviors and chronic suffering. Armed with the capacity to observe and the courage to welcome discomfort, we proceed to the third step, deep exploration. This is where you assume the role of cognitive detective, dissecting the thoughts, beliefs, and narratives that fuel your anxiety. Recall the analogy of the smoke alarm. Instead of dousing the house in water at each beep, you investigate whether the heat sensor has detected a genuine flame or a waft of toast. Similarly, ask yourself, is there an actual threat right now? Or is this anxiety speaking in hyperbole? For Jane, this might involve realizing that her vague dread is fueled by a cascade of microstressors: unpaid bills, an overdue email, a looming deadline. By externalizing these stressors, writing them down in a journal or a running worry list, she transitions from subconscious rumination to conscious investigation. She can then tackle each item methodically, scheduling a payment plan, drafting a brief status update, or setting aside dedicated work time. Bob's social anxiety might lead him to examine the automatic belief, "Everyone at the party will judge me," prompting him to gather evidence. Times he was warmly received at gatherings, supportive feedback from friends, or the likelihood that most people are too absorbed in their own concerns to scrutinize him. Fred, preparing his class presentation, can dissect his fear of failure by asking, "What does failure actually look like? Will a moment of stumbling truly derail my academic goals? Have I survived tougher challenges before?" This process reframes anxiety from an omnipotent dictator into a cautious advisor whose alarm bells can be evaluated for legitimacy. Cognitive restructuring techniques, rooted in cognitive behavioral therapy, show that examining and challenging distorted thoughts reduces anxious symptoms and improves problem-solving abilities. As exploration clarifies the nature of your anxiety, the fourth step, clarification of values and control, guides you to distinguish between what lies within your power and what does not, and to align your actions with what truly matters. In therapy, this is known as honing your locus of control and pinpointing your core values. Ask yourself, which elements of this situation can I influence, and which are beyond my scope? Fred cannot guarantee that every audience member will be impressed, but he can control his preparation, rehearsal, and choice to lean into the discomfort of public speaking. Bob cannot dictate whether the party's music will be to his taste, but he can choose to engage in conversation for 5 minutes, then honor his boundary if he needs a pause. Jane may not instantly eliminate the myriad stressors in her life, but she can choose to carve out mornings for meditation, schedule restorative breaks, and say no to one less aligned commitment each week. Simultaneously, clarifying values illuminates why these actions matter. If Bob values authentic friendships more than fleeting comfort, the temporary anxiety of socializing becomes a worthwhile cost for sustained connection. If Jane cherishes her family's well-being, she might prioritize early nights and mindful dinners over extra hours at the office. Fred, who aspires to a confident professional identity, can view each presentation as practice in embodying that future self. Psychological research underscores that values-driven action sustains motivation, mitigates despair, and fosters resilience in the face of persistent challenges. At last, the fifth step, committed action and radical acceptance, binds the entire process together. Here, the insights gleaned from observation, willingness, exploration, and values clarification translate into concrete behaviors and an openness to whatever arises. For aspects of your life you can change, commit to incremental steps that reflect your identified values. Jane might start by organizing a single cluttered drawer, a symbolic act of imposing order and reducing mental chaos. She might set an earlier bedtime on weekdays, cultivating the restorative sleep her anxious mind craves. Bob could plan to ask one genuine question of a colleague at the party, a small risk that prioritizes connection over comfort. Fred might rehearse his opening lines 10 times aloud, pairing each rehearsal with a mindful breath to anchor his nervous energy. In situations beyond your influence, the timing of others' responses, the rapid news cycle, or unpredictable external events, practice radical acceptance. Acceptance here is not passive resignation but an active acknowledgement that resisting reality only intensifies suffering. It is the profound recognition that you can hold uncertainty, discomfort, or even fear in one hand while grasping purpose, resolve, and compassion in the other. As you step into this posture, you model for your own nervous system the truth that your capacity to endure and act is far greater than the magnitude of any one anxious impulse. Perhaps the most transformative realization of this entire model is that the goal is not to eradicate anxiety. It is to cultivate the capacity to live a rich, meaningful life alongside it. A world devoid of any anxious signal would be one lacking in caring, growth, and the very aliveness that gives our choices significance. The ultimate victory is not in achieving perpetual calm, but in repeatedly showing up for the people and pursuits that matter, even when anxiety issues its countdown. Over time, as you face your fears, your brain learns a new lesson. You survived. You adapted. You thrived. Gradually, the smoke alarm loses its tyranny and resumes its role as a helpful sentinel rather than a relentless tormentor. As you move forward, remember that mastery unfolds incrementally, brick by brick, breath by breath. If these 5 steps seem daunting in their entirety, begin with a single breath, a single moment of curiosity about your inner world. Celebrate that small act of mindful engagement. Then add radical willingness the next day, a brief curiosity journal the day after, and so on. Each act compounds, forging neural pathways of resilience and rewiring your stress response toward flexibility. Whether you are Bob, stepping into his first awkward social environment, Jane piecing together scattered fragments of overwhelm, or Fred trembling before the lectern, the same pathway of observation, willingness, exploration, values, and committed action can carry you from contraction to expansion, from fear to freedom. In sharing this roadmap, we honor the dedicated work of therapists, researchers, and practitioners who illuminate the intricacies of the human mind. May their insights light your path as you embark on this courageous voyage towards self-knowledge. If you found these strategies helpful, consider sharing them with someone you care about. Perhaps a friend who dreads the next panic attack, a colleague who feels perpetually on edge, or a student overwhelmed by performance pressures. Let us build a community that treats anxiety not as a secret shame, but as a universal human experience to be faced with curiosity, compassion, and collective wisdom. Step by step, breath by breath, we can reclaim our neural sovereignty, proving that even in a world rife with stressors, our minds remain ours to steward, nurture, and free. If you found these strategies helpful, please give this video a thumbs up to let me know. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you won't miss future guides on mastering your mind.